Thank you, everybody. We're now moving into the three public hearings that we have this morning. One is from Treeline Project Management Limited with respect to a property in Bridgetown. One is with respect to the West Paradise Community Hall, and one is with respect to the Easton House. What we're going to do is we're going to have the three public hearings first, and then when those are complete, I'll ask for an amendment to the agenda, an amendment to the order of the day, to add three motions moving those matters forward. We can't put that on the agenda because we can't be making those decisions until we've heard from the public. So then when those motions come back onto our agenda, then we will, discuss the motions. So I'll start with the public hearing with respect to the Treeline Project Management Limited. Council is to deal with this in one public hearing. At the end of the public hearing session will be closed, and council will return to its regular session of council. As I mentioned, we'll do the three public hearings first before we go back to council. The purpose of a public hearing is to permit members of the public to make their views known to council via oral or written submissions concerning solely the application before council. This public hearing concerns file number 66520-35, Bridgetown 2021-LUB-001. This is an application by John Ray Lawrence, representing Treeline Project Management Limited, to amend the Bridgetown Land Use Bylaw zoning map to rezone a vacant lot known as 431 Granville Street in the community of Bridgetown from the residential light density R1 zone to the highway commercial C2 zone to permit the development of a construction equipment and trailer rental facility. All questions and comments throughout the public hearing is required to be addressed to the chair. The chair will afford an opportunity for public input and will ask that persons speaking identify themselves each time so that their comments may be recorded in the minutes of these proceedings, and that the person speaking identify if they are speaking in favor or against the application. Written presentations are acknowledged first, followed by public oral presentations. Questions and comments from council members are asked to be held until all public comment is heard. So the next item on the agenda is a presentation by Mr. Dunphy, our planner.
Thank you, Warren. One of the things I wanted to address with council first is these types of public hearings. We have two public hearings under two different pieces of legislation. The first one, of course, being under the Municipal Government Act, and the second ones are under the under the Heritage Property Act. The significant difference between these two public hearings, and we'll get to it, is with the Municipal Government Act one, it is purposely to invite the public in as well while we have a discussion about the application in front of us. When we look at public hearings that are authorized under the Heritage Property Act, they are very specifically applications and time for you as council to speak directly with the property owner. And in this case, a personal representative of the estate and such like this to ensure that they're aware of the implication of the Heritage Property legislation. Thank you very much. What I wanted to just jump in your package, you will have a staff report. What the staff report for this application of the government for Treeline is a compendium of exactly what we went through, what steps in the process, what we have, and what we summed with today. I will have some more comments at the end, and that will set up the next steps just for general information, but most of that stuff is behind the scenes. Thank you, Woody.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, do you wish to make any comments? Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any written submissions? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. No written submissions have been received.
Thank you. I will now call for oral presentations from the floor. First, I'll call for comments against the application. I'll make a second call for comments against the application. And I'll make a third call for comments against the application. Seeing none, I will call for comments in support of the application. I'll make a second call for comments in support of the application. And I'll make a third call for comments in support of the application. Seeing none, I'll call for questions or comments from council members. Seeing none, I'll ask Mr. Dunphy to address the next steps in the planning process.
Thank you, Gordon. As already alluded to, if council is in favor of making an application moving on to the second and final reading, that's something that the board had mentioned will be added to the agenda. A couple of comments I had on this application. It is a simple land use bylaw amendment application. Not simple in terms of complexity, but simple in terms of process. Process meaning simply is that because it is this type of land use bylaw amendment, it does not require sending it off to the Minister of Municipal Affairs for approval or the Director. And the reason is pretty simple is because, I say very simple law, the reason is that the municipal planning strategy already provides support to allow this type of rezoning to happen. If it didn't provide that support, that's when we get to something that's not simple. So voting is by the majority of people who have attended. So for future reference, if you miss a public hearing as a council member, you cannot vote that time. Everybody looks to be here today, so that's not really an issue. Procedurally wise, after council gives second and final reading, then an ad must be placed in the newspaper. What that newspaper article is, essentially, is to allow for anybody out there to make an application to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board for an appeal. That appeal period is 14 days after the notice is published in the newspaper. That would be written this Thursday to go into the paper for next week. Then it sets out the appeal period. What we'll notice, though, is the amendment becomes effective. If there is no appeals, it becomes effective the 14 days after. If there is an appeal, then the appeal must be disposed of by the Utility Review Board. If successful at the appeal stage, then the application can move forward only after all appeals are disposed of. Thank you, Board.
Thank you. I don't have any comments, and I will declare the public hearing with respect to this application closed. So we'll move along to the next public hearing. And I don't know if there's any particular order here. So I'll start with the, let's see. I think I'll start with the West Paradise Community Hall public hearing. So I'll declare the public hearing open. And I will repeat what I said in the last, with respect to the last public hearing for the record. Council is to deal with this public hearing called via Section 15 of the Nova Scotia Heritage Property Act. At the end of the public hearing will be closed, and council will return to its regular session of council. Before Annapolis County Municipal Council agrees to include a property in the Annapolis County Municipal Registry of Heritage Properties, a public hearing is held where the registered property owner, in this case the representative of the community hall, is given an opportunity to ask questions of council regarding the heritage registration. The purpose of this public hearing is to discuss with Susan Saunders, Vice President of the West Paradise Community Hall, who is requesting municipal heritage property registration for 5154 Highway 201 in the community of West Paradise, and that's PID number 05140421, more commonly known as the West Paradise Community Hall. Council also uses this time to explain what heritage registration means and to ensure that the property owner, the representative of the community hall, is aware of and in complete agreement with the registration of their property as a municipal heritage property. All questions and comments throughout the public hearing are to be addressed to the chair. The chair will afford an opportunity for public input and will ask that persons speaking identify themselves each time so that their comments may be recorded in the minutes of these proceedings, and that the person speaking identify if they are speaking in favor or against the application. Written presentations are acknowledged first, followed by public oral presentations. Questions and comments from council members are to be held until all public comment is heard. So, under new business, this is file number 66400-30, West Paradise Community Hall property registration application. Mr. Dunphy?
Thank you, Lord. Just to reiterate some of the things, we've seen this application before. We have the application for the West Paradise Community Hall. What we've done is included a staff report that you had previously seen as well, just for further reference, so you'll have information as to what the specific details of the property were, what the interesting points were, the date of construction, those sorts of things. There was an evaluation conducted of the property, which is a normal process, and the property was listed as a Category 1 designation. That means it's a priority in the registration process, as they scored 85 out of 100. As it says in the staff report, the hall was constructed around 1886. One of the interesting points I'd like to bring as well, based on the initials found inside the walls, the woodshed, John Henry Poole constructed that building in 1886. The structure was a schoolhouse for the community, as well as it has been a place for community events up until about 1945 when it started, and now serves as the West Paradise Community Hall. And what's also notable about this property is that the land parcel that it sits upon has been relatively unchanged since the original deed purchased from the neighbors, and at that time it was Ambrose and Harry Poole. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Mr. Dunphy. I'm now going to address these comments to the representative of the West Paradise Community Hall, who I met just earlier. You can remain standing, and you'll have you can go over there if you want, and I'll just read this to you. Heritage registration is a legal process enabled through the Provincial Heritage Property Act, by which the West Paradise Community Hall property is deemed to be significant to Annapolis County by being identified for its historical, architectural, or cultural value. The identification process is called registration, which in itself is a legal device that offers protection against substantial alterations or demolition of a registered heritage property. Operationally then, an encumbrance by way of the notice of registration is placed on the property and registered in the Registry of Deeds. Thus, any substantial change to the exterior of a structure, such as the addition of a deck or new windows, of a registered heritage property requires the approval of Annapolis County Municipal Council before any work is begun. Do you acknowledge, understand, and accept these conditions of municipal heritage registration?
I do.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, were there any written submissions?
No written submissions have been received.
Okay. I'm now going to call for oral presentations, and I would assume this would include you as well. When we get to the second part, no doubt. So I'll make a first call for comments against the application. A second call for comments against the application. And a third call for comments against the application. I'll make a first call for comments in support of the application. Would you like to speak?
I would. Good morning, Mr. Borden, representatives, and councillors. I have a little correction to make to Mr. Dunphy's presentation because I've come into possession of a new historical document, which as a historian and author, I was so excited. So on Saturday, when we were cleaning out the attic to get ready for installation, we discovered a logbook, and it's the actual school trustee minutes for the two schools in West Paradise, the first one being Evergreen Church, which is now church, and the second one being the hall in consideration here for municipal heritage status. So the book runs from 1876 to 1938. I made a couple of notes just to inform you. The very first chairman was Samuel Daniels, and first secretary was H.H. Morse. And the first entry was September 25th, 1876. And it goes along to give the why a new school was being built. There were two things. Apparently, according to these minutes, Evergreen Hall needed considerable repairs. So there was some discussion about whether or not to do repairs or to build a new house. The second consideration was, and if you've gone past Evergreen Hall, you know there is no room for a playground. So there was also discussion about whether to lease land or buy land for a playground for the children. So along with that, they also discussed perhaps with the cost of all these things, that maybe they'd be better off to build a schoolhouse in the spot where they could have a new schoolhouse and a playground. So the names that are mentioned in this era, like 1785, 86, are names that you would be familiar with on the church maps. So there was more discussion, and they had a committee to see what they would do. The committee came up with these proposals. At the meeting on October 11, 1885, it was resolved that a schoolhouse, if built, be situated on the west side of the Daniels Brook, and so-called resolved that the section build a schoolhouse and resolved to raise a sum not to exceed $600 plus the cost of the land to build it, and resolved that a building committee be appointed to build the schoolhouse. And this is a correction from Mr. Dunphy, and I apologize because I gave him the other name. But it was actually Ephraim Bachman, who was the inspector of the building crew, and Norman Longley, Fletcher Derlin, Peter Margison, and Abner Bachman, who built the schoolhouse. So Ephraim Bachman, by the way, was my 2 times great-grandfather. So I'm still related to the builder, as Mr. Poole was also related. So it was resolved that the schoolhouse be completed on or before the last Monday of September 1886. And apparently it was, because in the minutes, the regular annual general meeting of the school trustees on September 27, 1886, it was held, the West Paradise School Section number 51 meeting, met at 7 o'clock in the new schoolhouse. So I now have information they didn't have before. I don't have to conjecture. I'm not sure that my whole community is as excited or enthused as I am. However, they all agree that municipal heritage status would be a good step forward for us. And then we would have both our schools with municipal heritage status. That's all I wanted to say about it. Do you have any questions for me?
Before you go, can you identify yourself for the record?
Sorry, so you don't even know me. Susan Saunders.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments? Thank you, Ms. Saunders. I'll make a second call for comments in support of the application. I'll make a third call for comments in support of the application. Hearing none, are there any questions or comments from council members? Yes, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you. Just as a matter of interest, I wonder if Ms. Saunders could tell us how she felt when that book was found.
Mrs. Saunders was very emotional, as you can imagine, sir. And many of my relatives' names are in here, and I always get this funny feeling going over me whenever I'm touching something this old, that I know that their hands are touched. I don't know how many of you have seen my extraordinary book called An Incomplete History of West Paradise. It's available at Endless Shores Books, but I called it incomplete for a reason, because things like this continue to surface. So now I'm only missing the first 20 years of the minutes, which are probably in somebody's attic or a dumpster. And we have I'm missing maybe the last 10 years of the school being open, so very excited.
Thank you. Councillor Prout?
Thank you. As a bit of a student of history over the years, I was excited listening to you talk about that find in my own community, Malvern Square. I've been around long enough to I can remember the old hall and things that used to be there. And when I in particular was lost somewhere along the way, but that's where I started grade primary, mind you, in the one room, the hall. But it holds memories up through my teenage years until it was moved and since become a house. And we have the new school, which is now the community hall. So I'm very pleased to support this designation. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor LeBlanc?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Saunders, for sharing all that information with us. It's always nice to see you back to us, and I'm sure, I know it's near and dear to your heart even more now. So good luck with your everything.
Anyone else? Councillor Longmire?
Thank you. I too would like to say a sincere thank you, Susan, for sharing that information with us today, and I can hear the excitement in you as you're moving forward on this, and I look forward to looking at your book that you have spoke of today. Congratulations. I too will be in favor, and it's exciting for you and your community.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I will ask Mr. Dunphy to point out the next steps in the process.
Thank you, Gordon. Couple things. First one is, it is fantastic to be upstage once in a while. It's very kind additional information. And I'm jokingly going to say to you that As you recall, the heritage registration only applies to the exterior of the property. Therefore, my searches are only limited to the outside. I did not get into their information. But it just shows, again, the details that you cannot hope to cover in these types of applications. So, without anything else, what I just mentioned in terms of the next steps is that, as the board had mentioned, when you deal with these, there's usually a request after to add something to the council agenda for council to make a motion for this. Operationally, what also happened behind the scenes, there was a notice of recommendation filed in the registry against the property. Then this one, after council approval, will be a notice of registration. And this is just a summation. It provides a description that the property is not to be demolished or the exterior altered, but at municipal approval as part of the review. The Heritage Advisory Committee also must be consulted and their opinion be looked at. Council then can make grant or they can attach conditions onto the demolition or the substantial alteration. And not that we like to talk about it, people move ahead. There is notices in that notice of registration, the ability for substantial penalties for people who do not follow the conditions or rules set out that is registered to use property for heritage property. Thank you, Wood.
Mr. Dunphy, I have one question.
Yes.
Does the county have a plaque of some sort that goes on our municipally registered properties?
Absolutely. What we do is we use a old bronze plaque. It usually says registered property, Annapolis County, and then there's the circular date that we believe was constructed. On top of that, what we also do is we do some sort of a garden party, for lack of a better word, but it's a celebration where we ask the applicants to invite significant people. Council, of course, is invited, and no staff participated in this, we're also invited when we do an unveiling of that plaque. Thank you, Woody.
Thank you. Any other comments before we close this public hearing? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And we'll move along to the next public hearing. This is the public hearing with respect to the registration of the Eason House in Lakeele. I will read the process as I did previously. Council is to deal with this public hearing via Section 15 of the Nova Scotia Heritage Property Act. At the end of the public hearing will be closed and Council will return to its regular session of Council. Before Annapolis County Municipal Council agrees to include a property into the Annapolis County Municipal Registry of Heritage Properties, a public hearing is held where the registered property owners, in this case the representative of the estate, is given the opportunity to ask questions of Council regarding the heritage registration. The purpose of this public hearing is to discuss this with Marilyn Francis, the recognized executor and trustee of the estate of Victor Edward Francis, who is requesting municipal heritage property registration for 9427 Highway 8 in the community of Lakeele, PID number 05107560, more commonly known as the Eason House. Council also uses this time to explain what heritage registration means and to ensure that the property owner, the representative of the estate, is aware of and in complete agreement with the registration of their property as a municipal heritage property. All questions and comments throughout the public hearing are to be addressed to the chair. The chair will afford an opportunity for public input and will ask that persons speaking identify themselves each time so that their comments may be recorded in the minutes of these proceedings, and that the person speaking identify if they are speaking in favor or against the application. Written presentations are acknowledged first, followed by public oral presentations. Questions and comments from council members are to be held until all public comment is heard. So this is file number 66400-30, Easton House property registration application. Mr. Dunphy?
Thank you, Lynn. I want to begin with comments along the same stuff applies in terms of process or anything else. This is a priority registration. A report didn't even have to be done because it essentially scores 100 out of 100, which is an automatic designation. In a summation of that, what I'd like to just simply say in terms of my comments from what I am aware of the property, 1799. Wow. Thank you, Ward.
Ms. Francis, would you like to come forward and I'll read this out with you in the at the lectern? Thank you. Heritage registration is a legal process enabled through the Provincial Heritage Property Act by which the Easton House property is deemed to be significant to Annapolis County by being identified for its historical, architectural, or cultural value. The identification process is called registration, which in itself is a legal device that offers protection against substantial alterations or demolition of a registered heritage property. Operationally, then, an encumbrance by way of the notice of registration is placed on the property and registered in the Registry of Deeds. Thus, any substantial change to the exterior of a structure, such as the addition of a deck or new windows, of a registered heritage property, requires the approval of Annapolis County Municipal Council before any work is begun. Ms. Francis, do you acknowledge, understand, and accept these conditions of municipal heritage registration?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, were there any written submissions?
No written submissions were received, Warden.
Ms. Francis, would you like to make any comments before I invite the public?
No, so my dad was everything the way it was. There's nothing we changed to that. There's nothing we changed. The original, the windows, the insulation, the wiring, everything is was built in 1799.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that myself. Could you try that again without the mask?
I said nothing was changed in the house. The original shingles are on it. The wiring is the same. There's no insulation. Nothing was changed in that house as it was built in 1799. All there, the original. As it stands today.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Francis. You can sit down now. I'll make a first call for comments against the application. I'll make a second call for comments against the application. I'll make a third call for comments against the application. I'll make a first call for comments in support of the application. I'll make a second call for comments in support of the application. And I'll make a third call for comments in support of the application. Hearing none, I'll call for questions or comments from council members. Councillor Morrison?
Thank you. I'm interested in knowing what wiring would have been present in 1799.
I take it that she's referring to wiring that was there for a long time. I don't know if it was necessarily there in 1799.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Redden?
I have a curiosity. Has the original owner at
Can you take your mask off?
My apologies. Has the original owner of the area being a Gutierre in 1745, and the property was confiscated for disloyalty? Am I correct in understanding that would be an Acadian expulsion in 1755. I mean, that is, I've never encountered a building this old with that kind of history that was actually taught in school, and I think
Well,
that's
you're
really
right, the
spectacular.
expulsion was 1755, and it looks like this poor Mr. Gautier did something that was frowned upon by the officials, and the property was confiscated for his disloyalty, so I don't think it would have necessarily been part of the expulsion.
Okay.
It would be going to the expulsion.
It was leading up to the expulsion, for sure. Councillor LeBlanc?
This historical, I think it's a historical find, that's the way I see it. Because it certainly, I don't know if we have any older buildings in the area for heritage, I have no idea. So it's just phenomenal to have all this background to it and to see it as it was and the way it was built to still stand the way it is. So I find this outstanding history.
I went through the building with Ms. Francis and the deputy warden myself, and being a heritage advocate, I was very impressed with the building. It still has the original fireplaces and the wonderful brick arched foundation in the basement to support all the weight of the fireplaces. It has a curved stairway going up to the second floor. The original floorboards. It's a very special building. I really hope that it is for sale, at least last time I looked. And I do hope that whoever buys it treats it the way it should be treated. Any other questions or comments? Deputy Warden?
Thank you. I'm delighted to have the recognition placed on this property. You know, and I sure do thank old Vic. I knew him well years ago, posthumously, for not modernizing back in the 70s, which everybody did to these houses. Vic had the sense to leave it as it was and burn a little extra wood. Thanks, Vic.
Thank you. With no other comments or questions from council members, I'll turn it back to Mr. Dunphy.
Thank you. So just in way of background on some of the stuff, a reminder that heritage registration, it is registered in the registry of deeds. Any time the property changes hand, the heritage registration, like a development agreement, carries forward with it until it's deregistered by the municipality. So all subsequent owners have to follow the same rules as set out. Council will, I suspect, because the property is up for sale, eventually through the Heritage Advisory Committee have to look at some form of restoration plans. We'll see where they go. That's basically what it is. Thank you, Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Dunphy. So seeing no other, I have no other comments myself, and I don't see any others from council, so I will declare the public hearing closed, and we'll return to the regular session of council.